Do you find the more you build, the busier you are? For example, something that's become a regular job for myself is AFKing at our creeper farm we built on episode 4. I haven't shown this place since, but as you can see, we've put in some time here, and it's integral we do so. It dawned on me that we're going to need TNT for future projects, and I didn't have much gunpowder built up when this thought entered my mind. So I've been trying to change that with any free time I've had, and it's safe to say it's been doing well. This current session has netted me over 3 large chests worth of gunpowder. Alongside my many other recent AFK sessions, the supply had been steadily building. 1 TNT needed 5 gunpowder, and for TNT to be effective in terrain clearance, which is what I'm after, we're going to need it in large supplies, hence the AFK work. It's going to be an expensive block. Also, while in the area, I harvested the sugarcane. I don't do it all that often, but paper was needed. To refill half of my rocket shulker, the other half was filled with gunpowder, which saddened me slightly because that's a few stacks we wouldn't be able to put towards TNT. I prefer to have the paper and gunpowder separate rather than pre-crafting the rockets and filling the shulker with them, because I'm effectively tripling the amount of rockets I can store in this shulker. And just because I know I'm going to want to add more chests to the area for gunpowder storage for future AFK sessions, I expanded the platform. Then it was over to the project cube, the glorious thing we made last episode. However, when I went through our portal, like in the last episode, I was transported to a completely different location, inconvenient. This time, a random cave. I wonder if it's because I've recently updated to 1.21. I don't know. It's the only thing I can think of that might have messed up the connection. The only thing to do was to go searching for the black beacon beam at the project cube, because I had no other way of finding the place. I normally always take the coordinates of things I've built, but I haven't for this because I didn't think I'd ever need to. Go figure. I hadn't installed any doors into the thing either, so when I did find it, I had to break into my own build, which, by the way, doesn't count as breaking and entering if it's my own property. At least I don't think it does. The portal was retested to see if it would reconnect to our other one in the nether. It appeared to, and I did this for a few times to make sure, and nothing seemed to be amiss, so I guess that meant we were back in business. I'd had a few different ideas for what I wanted to do this episode, so rather than keep them inside my head, I wrote them down on signs, put them on the wall of the project cube, which is what the place was designed for. However, I'd come to find out all of my time would basically go into the one project. I couldn't remember where any of our nether fortresses we'd found were, so I went searching for a new one by using the straight line method, which is a pretty complex and nuanced approach. Basically, you pick a direction and head in that direction until you find what you're looking for. While out in what I thought to be an unexplored part of the nether, I came across another one of my makeshift roads, no more than 40 blocks away from me. I can't say I wasn't disappointed. I had a hunch what I'd find, and following it led me straight to those expectations, an already found nether fortress, which should be cause for celebration. However, the basalt delta biome put me off. I'm ready for spawn proofing the surrounding terrain, which doesn't make much sense because I haven't actually told you what I'm going to be doing this episode, but if I am going to be spawn proofing the terrain, I'm not going to be doing that for a basalt delta biome. That would be incredibly painful. And while I am highly masochistic to a certain degree, I can sometimes spot a suicide mission when I see one, so I put my world seed into a seed map to find other nether fortresses. After having been searching for a while, I figured, why not just get the coordinates for one? There were a lot available, and in the end, or nether, I settled on one in a nether waste biome on the edge of a soul sand valley in Crimson Forest, only a few hundred blocks out from my portals. I didn't want it to be miles out, that would just be inconvenient. En route, I found a bastion, killed the piglins and brutes. Don't be mad, I like pigs, but they would have done the same to me. Looted all of their chests, most notably got the snout armor trim and smith and template respectively. When I got to where the fortress was supposed to be, I was a little unsure if I'd been accurate, but the biomes matched up with the map, so I gave it a chance. Good thing, because after some flying around, we found it. Lit it up first to prevent some mob spawns in other areas of the fortress, like wither skeletons. There are mobs that would still spawn regardless, but it was the wither skeleton spawning I was trying to restrict, because I decided the point of this episode was to be setting up a wither skeleton farm. Finally, after how many minutes into the episode, and I'm finally telling you what this episode is about, and part of that is controlling where they can and cannot spawn. I'm not going to be consulting a tutorial either for this episode, I'm just going to go solo. So when you look at this farm and think, what on earth is this abysmal piece of crap he's decided to label as a wither skeleton farm, now you know why. And saying that, in my mind, now absolves me from any criticism regarding the efficiency of the farm, because I'm admitting up front, it's going to be awful. Like, I'm telling you right now, it's going to be awful. Anyway, talking of a wither skeleton farm, I got started by building a platform. It was at one of the crossroads section of the fortress I knew the wither skellies spawned. Simply going around the outside of it, adding one line of nether bricks one side at a time, it was going to become the only place I'd allow them to spawn. Obviously, the more I went on, the larger the number of nether bricks needed to make a complete run around the perimeter of the platform, so it meant resorting to taking down a couple of the nether brick pillars of the fortress. In terms of the size of the platform, I figured I'd continue until one of either two things happened. One, hostile mobs spawning on one side of the platform when I was on the other side, or 2, when I got fed up. Blazes kept spawning in when all I wanted were wither skeletons. I could already foresee them becoming a problem. In fact, they were already a problem because they continuously set me on fire and took up a lot of my time. Not only that, but more than once I had to deal with angry hordes of zombified piglins because of missed arrow shots aimed at blazes and hit one of the piglins by accident. I mean, one of the times I thought I was completely safe, but I actually wasn't and got knocked off of my pillar and subsequently killed. Talk about an Uno reverse, and got sent all the way back to spawn because the last bed I'd slept in had been broken. It wasn't a big deal. Spawn was near to my trading hall where there were numerous ender chests dotted about, which I used to gear up with a backup elytra, rockets, a silk touch pick and food. Then travelled all the way back to the fortress. I'd like to say quickly, but I couldn't find my road, so I had to create another one. Blazes had competition when it came to the world's most annoying mob. Ghasts were a good contender, and because we were bordering on a soul sand valley, there was never a shortage of them. How fortunate. Piglins would also spawn, which usually wouldn't be an issue, but because I wasn't wearing gold, they were often on my case too. Though this was definitely preventable because I had a golden helmet in my ender chest, so sympathy is definitely not deserved on this account, but if you want to give it out then sure. Eventually, even with the resistance, it was complete. For the amount of time it took to make this place, it's underwhelming. I confess, during the process I had to kill my fair share of wither skeletons that had spawned in the area, and with the assistance of a looting 3 sword, got a couple of skulls. Only one more, I'd have enough to summon the wither. I'd collected a mismatch of blocks during the process. Like with every other project I've worked on, that collection went to the trade hall to be dumped back into the ecosystem. And I tell you what, keeping hold of the blocks I mine had paid off because now I needed slabs for spawn proofing. That's right, I was going to be taking on the unenviable challenge of covering the surrounding terrain at the wither skeleton farm in order to stop mob spawns everywhere else other than our platform, which yes would take a lot of work and might end up becoming the bulk of the work of this video, but it was a step I'd have to take for the farm to see the minimal amount of success I hoped for. I was unsure how much of the terrain we'd need to spawn proof, but I was expecting it to be more than I expected. Paradoxical. The problem with the mob platform, or one of the many problems, is I don't have a safe space to stand and kill mobs without getting killed myself. So for relative safety, I created a glass box at the centre. Glass because I'd be able to see the mobs and they wouldn't be able to see me because for whatever reason they can't see through glass, which I'm not complaining about. I like that feature. And it worked well at keeping me safe. As long as I didn't get seen by ghasts because, and this might come as a surprise, their fireballs don't mix well with the glass. Of course, I needed to do a little tester to see if it actually worked for killing mobs, and it was half decent. And that's more than the certification I needed to be content. So next it was the daunting task of spawn proofing the outer terrain. There's no beating around the bush. Let's say what it was, a lot of damn work. The reality was that it was going to take a long time. I'd mentally prepped for some huge spawn proofing session, but that wouldn't reduce the amount of work to be done. The first port of call was to spawn proof the rest of the fortress. That included all of the chambers and corridors it consisted of. Of course, en route, all chests were looted, though at this point of the game there's nothing to be really gained from doing so other than to feed my looting appetite. Mobs were still as annoying as ever, mainly the blazes, which I decided were the most annoying mob, beating ghasts by quite a bit. At some point I thought about using fire res potions so I'd be able to work in peace, but then I changed my mind and convinced myself they weren't worth it. Don't know if that was some weird sort of pride thing, but it was also because I was concerned about using them up and then falling into lava and not having a way to save myself. But looking back now, what was the point of having them on me if I'm cautious about using them? They're not exactly hard to make and they're designed for when I'm in the nether. So as for wither skeletons, I had a kill on sight rule, and that's how I got a 3rd skull. At this point I had enough to summon the wither, get a 2nd beacon and be done with this place until a later date. But I wanted to finish what I started. I also wanted to get a lot more than 3 skulls while I was here, because the plan is to have lots of beacons around the world, not ones I have to take down and carry with me because we don't have enough beacon blocks. That's poor person mentality. I think I need to practice kiting mobs because I died leading a horde of wither skeletons to my killing chamber. Although maybe not, because the problem was I had to crouch to get through the doorway and that slowed me up enough that they were able to get in that fatal hit. I hope this doesn't become a regular occurrence because it's really inconvenient having to run back. I suppose it was fortunate my respawn point was at the trade hall now, because I'd made sure to set it after my last death. Always learn from your mistakes. And again, the ender chest came in clutch, allowing access to crucial supplies for travel back, which if we're being honest was an elytra and rockets. And with them, got all of my gear back without hassle. Not a single thing was missing, I don't think. Work continued as if nothing had happened. On to another topic, slabbing was a time-consuming activity. The thing I had to watch out for were the little areas of terrain that were cave-like in shape, and would have mobs spawn within if I didn't keep my eyes peeled and add slabs to the area. And there were a lot of them, because it was simply the nature and shape of the biome. I knew before starting it would take up a lot of work, but it's not until you start something you really understand the undertaking. Realistically, Realistically, I should slab 128 blocks out from the platform in all directions, but that was a lot of terrain, and I didn't know if I wanted to do that. On the plus, because there's always a plus, it was nice to get larger amounts of uninterrupted time working on the terrain, mainly because I was away from our platform and the blazes that spawned there, though occasionally that piece would be interrupted. They'd always find a way to snipe me, and by occasionally I mean every 10 to 15 minutes. Got another wither skeleton skull, that made number 4. I know I was just saying how inconvenient death was, but in some instances, it's an opportunity. Why take the couple of minutes travel back through the nether when I could shove my gear into a shulker inside my ender chest and then throw myself off the edge into lava? Death was instantaneous. But so too was travel back to the overworld, where I had immediate access to our gear, and that's how you save yourself a couple of minutes travel. I'd saved some gold nugget ore from the nether. They were to be smelted and added to the beacon shulker, but what I was really there for was a top up on slabs needed for the nether. I found it better to take blocks because I'd be able to turn them into more slabs than what we'd be able to carry if we'd just taken the slabs themselves, which would mean less lava swimming antics. I was hoping that would be the last time I'd have to restock on blocks, praying that what we'd brought with us would be enough for the remaining spawn proofing session. I don't want to say this was a sign, but this is like the third piece of ancient debris I'd found since starting the world, without ever going deep into the nether, and all I've got to say is it showing up now has got to be a sign. As we got further into our mission, I found it was growing increasingly peaceful as I came into contact with less and less mobs. I think mostly because there were less and less space for them to spawn, so most were spawning on our platform and taking up the mob cap, exactly what I was after. Unfortunately, these guys were still spawning. The jury might have decided they're not as annoying as blazes, but that doesn't stop them from making life worse in every single way. Of course, the one mob we did want, we'd take the opportunity to kill when we went back to stock up on slabs, and we'd take pleasure in doing so. Like I said, kill on sight. I was hoping more and more wither skeletons would appear on our platform as less terrain became unavailable to spawn on. In theory, that's what should happen, and I believed it was happening. As for the slabbing, I've been beginning to think I was coming to the end of the experience, but no, that was a delusion, because I kept on finding new areas to slab. More and more places that were close enough to my spawning platform to prevent mob spawns were being uncovered as I scoured the terrain, and these places had a lot of mobs that would be taken away from our spawning platform, mainly zombified piglins, and although they weren't bothering me, like said, they were taking up the mob cap numbers, so the spaces needed spawn proofing. Next time I might just dig out a giant perimeter, because the slabbing was taking hours to do. I realised a perimeter would take even longer if done by hand, but man, it would be less tedious. However, despite the wavering enthusiasm, it was working. As hoped, when I was back to restock on slabs, slowly and surely more and more mobs were gathering on the spawning platform, noticeably too. Sometimes I'd have hordes of wither skeletons chasing me, and damn, it was satisfying to kill them. I've already said, but I'll say it again, there were so many layers to the nether with hidden spawnable blocks, like a lot of hidden spaces, ravines, caves, chambers, floating islands. The nether terrain was a pain to slap, a real pain, and I was doing all this work for one of the most inefficient wither skeleton farms in the existence of Minecraft. But as inefficient as it was, it worked as intended. Is it as efficient as a full-scale wither skeleton farm you see most people do? Not at all. Does it work for me? I can't say anything other than yes. I think I'm finished placing slabs for the time being. There's so many of them, they look like snow covering the terrain. At some point in the future, I'd like to clear out an entire perimeter and really up the rates of the farm, but I can't see that being for some time, because that is going to be a lot of work, and it really would be demoralising if I did all this work slabbing and then decided to mine out a giant perimeter, because I should have just mined out the giant perimeter instead of slabbing. If I'm going to be in the area for stints of time killing mobs, mainly wither skeletons, I needed chests to store the drops. There wasn't much space in the glass hub, so they became the flooring. Should be okay because mobs can't spawn on chests. So far, I'd managed to get a hold of 16 skulls since starting this project, enough for 5 beacon blocks. The unfortunate thing was, until I got wither roses to only spawn wither skeletons, this place would be a breeding ground for every mob under the sun. One of those mobs I haven't spoken about, magma cubes. Another annoying mob. In fact, I was annoyed by every mob other than wither skeletons because they, like all the others, were unwanted. And while currently I couldn't prevent other mobs from spawning, I could put a stop to magma cubes simply by placing slabs a couple of blocks apart, eliminating the requirements needed for them to spawn. It should also heighten the rates of wither skeletons spawning. Of course, it would also heighten the spawn rates of the other mobs I wanted to be able to prevent, but it was still a net gain. I decided to bite the bullet and use fire res potions while working in the area. With so many blazes about, without them, progress would have been little to none. I also had to temporarily light up the space with torches so wither skeletons and regular skeletons wouldn't be able to sneak up on me while I worked. And I managed to get it done. It was ugly, but no magma cubes would ever be seen here again. Took out the torches so the 2 types of skeletons could respawn, and then devoted my time to killing wither skeletons. I only planned to stay there for an hour or so. Because I would stand at the centre to kill, the platform wasn't large enough to continuously spawn in wither skeletons, so I had to keep flying far enough away for mobs to despawn, then turn around and fly back so new mobs would respawn on the platform. I'd then run around grabbing the attention of the wither skeletons, lead them over to my glass chamber where I'd kill them. It worked well. No, it wasn't ideal, and yes, we had other mobs to deal with, but like I said, that will become an easy fix once we get wither roses. But I'm going to need to get enough wither skeleton skulls before I can worry about wither roses. At one point I did die because I let myself get hit too many times, and when I tried to eat to heal myself, opened my ender chest instead and my health just dropped to 0. It wasn't a big deal, more inconvenient than anything. I got all of my stuff back without issue. After my session, I'd gained another 24 skulls, adding that to my already obtained 16, and we had 40 to play with, enough for 13 withers. We also got close to 12 stacks of coal, really useful for smelting and torches. The 17 stacks of bones would get added to my bone meal box. We didn't get many blaze rods. I tried where possible to ignore them, even if they didn't want to ignore me, always be the bigger person. Back in the overworld, I dumped all of the unused blocks I'd taken for slabs into the nether, back into the storage, changed another of my storage shulkers into a chests shulker, seeing as I'm always needing chests and hate taking wood from my wood shulker to craft them and then have no wood for anything else. And luckily that didn't need to happen here because of a previous wood gathering session in our last bonus episode you can watch by becoming a member. There was enough to craft a full shulker box worth of chests. I tried to leave ender chests around the world for convenience where I can, and my personal stock was running dry. It was easy to craft a new bunch of them, however my limited obsidian held me back from crafting as much as I wanted, but there was one place that had a lot of it. However, obsidian takes ages to mine, so on a quick tangent, I trapped a wither under the end portal for an easy and dehumanizing kill, given us a nether star, allowing us to make another beacon block. Our only other one is at the project cube, supplying the area with that speed 2 boost. Set up a full-fledged beacon next to one of the obsidian towers and got to work. I remember complaining last episode about deep slate being a slow block to mine, but even with an efficiency 5 haste 2 affected pickaxe, I could only mine an obsidian block about every 2 seconds. On the plus, I only had to grab enough to craft the rest of the ender chests. I wanted at least a stack. Next, fixed the wither skelly farm issue with chickens. I'd gotten these leads from naturally extinguished wandering traders, made a pen for them at the trade hall. They needed to go somewhere and I'm there a lot, although it's not going to be helping lagging issues. Flew up to the wheat farm above the sheep farm, hoping I hadn't put all of the wheat seeds into compost. I hadn't, a big surprise because I actually thought I had. Used those wheat seeds to breed the handful of chickens I'd got, as well as throwing back their eggs in the hope they'd hatch. Then it was on to trading, not to repair my tools, although that's what I did at the start, but instead as something to keep me busy while I waited for the chickens to grow in number. I'd keep going back once a day to breed them up. Each time they'd grow in number, I'd pick up slightly more eggs than last time, throw them back into the pen to increase the number some more, and then head back to the trading, and the cycle would repeat. Plus, now that we were moving into a position of owning a lot more beacon blocks, many of the emeralds I was gaining would eventually become beacons, and with a dream to have beacons all around the world, every single green gem was welcome. After quite a few of those cycles, we had an army of poultry, or should I say an army of mothers, because I only wanted them for their eggs. I was able to pick up and carry. The plan was to have the wither kill all of the hatched chicks when he first explodes at the beginning of the fight, giving yours truly a load of wither roses to use for the wither skeleton farm. That meant throwing them in to hatch before summoning the wither, which I'm sure they'd try to stop if they'd known what was coming their way. Unfortunately, most of them survived the blast. Actually, I think all of them survived, and I took out half of them with my sweeping edge sword by mistake, so I had to switch to my axe. After the fight, I can't say I was pleased with the outcome. What made matters worse, the chickens got loose out into the end when I'd gone inside to collect the nether star and inspect for wither roses. That demotivated me enough that I decided to just summon and kill withers and use up all of the skulls. However, after wither 2, I noticed roses around the end in the terrain directly around the end portal. The wither blast must have killed some of the chickens that got loosed, meaning the first blast wouldn't be enough, but a second was. So back to the chicken coop to recoup on eggs for another attempt. Something I had noticed about the area, and I'll show you, the trade hall, villager breeder and string duper being in the same area had already been causing some lag, but now we had the chickens too. It was getting out of hand. It even affected my ability to pick up XP from trades, but I didn't plan to have the chickens for long. Hopefully then the lag would disappear. Back in the end, there were more frustrations, the main being the wither didn't appear after I'd placed the 3 skulls. Turned out I'd forgotten to put in the last block of soul sand, and with the amount of chickens it was impossible to get that block placed as much as I tried, so I had to kill more than half of them to get it placed. Then I summoned the wither, wither, not once, but twice to deal the killing blow to the chickens, netting a grand total of, wait for it, 23 wither roses. Yeah, this wasn't going to work. So I created an obsidian chamber to house the wither and trap the chickens at the same time, having the wither kill the chickens in mass to give me a massive amount of wither roses. The lag made getting chickens in tricky, but once enough was in the chamber, it was clear it wasn't going to work out. The chamber was way too small, and I didn't want to spend a lot of time collecting obsidian to make it bigger. Frankly, I was fed up of chickens. At any rate, by the time I got them trapped in, I had only a few. At this point, I couldn't deal with chickens any longer. It was at that moment I decided the only option was to kill, and that's what I did. Killed every chicken I came across, and you know what? I don't regret anything. There were a lot of them to kill, but my frustrations were enough to see me through. And that's going to be it for this episode. I'll have to think of a better way of getting wither roses to make this farm even a fraction of efficient, but technically, we have a fully functional, manual, not particularly good wither skeleton farm, and it serves a purpose, and that's all I care about. If you want more content and don't want to wait for the next video, you can become a member and get your hands on it. If not, I'll see you soon. Alright, bye.